Have you checked off all the boxes to finding happiness and still feel like there's something missing? My guest today, James Walters, believes happiness is inside of you by taking ownership of your life story and realizing the only thing you can control is how you respond to anything in life. Listen to my interview and start being the author of your own story. Hi, James. Thank you so much for joining me on my Choose Courage podcast today.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here and I'm ready to have this conversation. I've been excited about it for a while. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You interviewed me on your podcast, which is The Joyful Rebellion, which that caught my attention. Just even the title. And then when you interviewed me, we just had such a wonderful conversation. And I felt like there was so much more I wanted to understand about you and your story. So I'm going to jump right in. I
All
know that
right.
you've been a photographer for over 30 years,
Yes. Yes.
and that's been your main career
It
profession.
has. It's what I was really interested in when I was in high school. And I was able, fortunately, to parlay that into a pretty long career so far.
Wonderful. And I
Yeah.
love that you have now branched out just a little bit to do your podcast and also you do some writing, correct?
Yes, I do. I'm wrapping up this month my second book, which is actually my first picture book. My first book was about 10 years ago, but it was more of a memoir of parts of my life in the photography world. And just funny stories. People would always ask me, "Hey, tell me this or that." And so that I wrote a book about it. And this one's a little different. So I'm excited to get it wrapped up and out into the world.
That's so exciting. I can't wait. Is it so more pictures and there's some writing, but what's the name of it? What's the title?
It's called Meditations of the Mundane.
Aha.
And it is all about, it's photos of things that if you walked right by it, you would not notice it at all. It's objects, it's things on the ground. Sometimes it's literally pictures of trash, but it's the sort of thing that what if those objects had a story? What if they could tell you something? What if they had a past? What if they have opinions on the people they've interacted with along the way? And so each photo is complemented. So there's a photo on one page, and there's a complementary, I guess, text or story that goes along with that object. And so that's what it's really all about. So it's just a lot of really bite-sized glimpses into the life of something you'd never really even think about at all. And that's what I've done for so many years. As a photographer, I kind of dip into the lives of either people,
Mm.
or sometimes if I'm doing a corporate or a commercial situation, I dip into the life of that business and I get to hear really interesting things, kind of behind the scenes stuff. Same thing if I'm photographing portraits of people, or even when I did a lot of weddings, and
Mm.
I would get to go into that dynamic and get to experience it. And then I kind of like grandparents get to give the baby back, so they don't have to be in it all the time. I was able to go back to my life and have a much wider perspective the next day.
Wow, that is so amazing and cool. And the word that kept coming to me was perspective.
Yeah,
That that what the one saying about, you can't see the tree in the forest, things like
right.
that, that we walk around and as a photographer, your lens, you can either focus in or make it wide, and you see things in people and in life that we don't normally focus on, which we're kind of missing out on a lot.
A little bit. And when I first started in photography, that was my whole thing. I wanted to be able to be standing beside someone and we could be looking at the exact same thing, but be seeing it in a completely different way. And as a photographer, that's really my goal when I photograph anything, is to be able to show people the world in a way they wouldn't think to look at it. And even if it's a picture of them, I want to make sure and even if they're, let's say, I was photographing someone or at a wedding, I want to make sure that their aunt who has their camera phone over my shoulder and is photographing the same thing, when they look at the two, they're like, "Oh my gosh!" And not even take out the whole professional photographer part. I just want to show a slice of that person that they may not be used to seeing in themselves. Yeah.
Wow. This is so exciting. I mean, I get excited about this because of 30 years experience, it probably really has taught you so much about how you see life and how that correlates with how you see yourself, how you show up in life, how you help others show up in life. And now you have a book out that's also illustrating that, or another one, the second one that's
Yeah.
coming out. And then also now then you started the podcast, The Joyful Rebellion, which I want to dig into all of this and how it all connects. And
Yeah.
it feels like it's been 30 years, but all of a sudden you felt like there was something else that there's something else that you want to do in your life. So what was behind you starting the podcast?
Yeah, the podcast was really a manifestation of when I figured out that I've been behind the scenes for a really long time. And not only in my career, that's my job is to be, I'm behind the camera, I'm behind the scenes, I'm not the one out front. And with the podcast, I still wanted to tell other people's stories. And that is a big part of being a photographer. I'm always telling someone else's story. And I am putting my creativity, I'm putting a little bit of myself in those photos. But with the podcast, I was really able to take the narrative and talk to people who I really wanted to talk to, who really had something that I loved that they were saying. And that's why I talked to you. That's why I talk to each week, talk to another guest who really works through the theme of what a joyful rebellion is all about. And just for anyone listening, a joyful rebellion, the reason I called it that is because there's a time that, and sometimes we hit it at several points in our lives. And I know a lot of people who are 27, they call it the quarter life crisis. And that's when you've been out of school, you've been in your career for a little while, and you look around and you're like, oh, I'm still eating ramen noodles. I'm still in a one-bedroom apartment, and this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then a few years go by and you get settled in a different way and you think, okay, things are really good. But then at some point you look around and like, this trail didn't take me where I thought it was going to go. And so it's really that point in life, and it can happen so often, or it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's got a big impact on people. And so many that I've talked to look around. They did all the things they were supposed to do or they were told to do. They went to the right schools, they got the right jobs, they had the 2.3 kids and the dog, and they look around, they feel a little burdened, and maybe they don't feel quite as amazing as they thought they would when they were, objectively they're successful.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
on the inside, maybe they're just, they feel that little pull to be a little more of who they thought they would be when they grew up.
Mhm.
And that's what the podcast is all about. And so I love to talk to people who have either been through that journey or help people through that journey. And you've done both. You continue to help people through it. You've been through that journey yourself, and that's evident in everything you talk about in your book. So that's why I was really drawn to you when I saw your info.
Thank you so much. And I love that you are holding a space for people to share their story. And, I think that I love the title, The Joyful Rebellion. And what that means to me and what you're doing and what you're saying is that we do have all these different phases in our life and transformations or even failures where we have to get back up and start
Very
over
much.
again. And a lot of times I think that this joyful rebellion is about when we started down past what we thought society, family, even we put expectations on ourselves that really weren't really going to bring out who we were meant to be or our
Mm,
best self and it was confusing. So you get there and you just like, well, wait a minute, this is supposed to bring me all the fulfillment that I'm supposed to have in my life, and it's not. And
yeah.
it takes that's going to bring me to courage. I think
Okay. Yeah.
anyone that you're talking to that's had this joyful rebellion in life and chose to start living that life for themselves to bring
Yes.
fulfillment, that takes a lot of courage because you're going against
No.
everything or society, even what you thought you should do a lot of times. Or you thought it was just, how like, yeah, but I can't really have that, or I can't really do that. You had a lot of reasons why you couldn't do it. And it takes courage to just ignore all of those things, all those thoughts and beliefs, and do it anyway.
Right.
Yes. So tell me how that's happened in your life. Because
Okay. Well,
you're teaching other people to do this, or you're helping people to tell their story. But I know it's happened in your life, hopefully.
yeah, well that's part of the intro to the podcast when I say I want people to be the author of their own story. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is I lived a lot of my life just going through the motions, things that I thought I was, good, responsible. I had a creative job, but
Mhm.
that was my job. I was able to be creative, but then there's so much more to life than just your job. And I got to that point in my life where I realized, okay, I I've kind of checked off all the boxes, things that I wanted to do, and I'm still feeling like I've got a lot of gas in the tank. This was maybe in my early 30s, and objectively, I had all the things I was supposed to have at that point. Successful career, had the house, starting to have the family, and looked around. And it's like there's got to be more, and so I started reaching outside of me, thinking, okay, I'll find the answer in business coaches or in things that or people who could advise me and sort of steer me in the direction of what next might look like.
Mhm.
And so I did reach out to coaches. I got a little, and going to bring that word perspective up again. And so it allowed me to see what could be. And then I made the decision, okay, I know what it will take to get there. Don't really, maybe don't want that, maybe do want other parts of what they're suggesting. But there got to be a point at which I had exhausted all the advice of all of the business coaches, life coaches, and people who were really helping me understand the situation I was in. I was reading books. I went through a little period where I was just a little bit exasperated because I wasn't finding the happiness I wanted. So I was reading books on happiness.
Mhm.
And I was looking for it everywhere. And one day I just realized I put down the book, I think halfway into reading it. And I said, oh gosh, I have to make this happen. Like no one else besides me can make it happen. But what that's going to take is it's going to take, like you said, courage for me to stand up and say what I want, which I don't know if you know anything about the Enneagram.
Yes,
I,
yes, yes.
I'm an Enneagram 9. And
Yes, I do.
yeah, so an Enneagram 9, we're the peacemakers,
Yes.
and I'm the oldest of 5 kids.
Ah,
So that was my role in my world growing up. I was the peacemaker, and a good and bad part of the peacemaker, you can kind of see everyone else's point of view.
mhm.
And what happens with that, and because you can see everyone's point of view, you can do a better job at being a peacemaker. But
Yes,
what you lose is you lose yourself.
yes,
And unless you keep that really healthy balance of knowing what you want, if you do that too long, if you're being a peacemaker for your whole life, which I guess I was in a lot of ways, then you end up not really knowing what you want out of life. You're always kind of deferring to let's do what someone else wants.
yes.
And that can only last so long before you hit the wall. And that was what I realized. I realized, okay, I need to really get familiar and need to get uncomfortable with what it is I want and state it and just go after it. And so that's what I started doing, and that's what the podcast is about.
Wow, congratulations, first of all. And that did take a lot of courage. And when did this all, when was this point? How long ago?
That point was probably about 11 years ago.
11 years ago.
That was the point. There was a ton of turmoil in my life. There's a point in a lot of people's lives where their grandparents start to age to the point where that generation starts to die off. And then
Mm.
that In my family, that happened with all the grandparents on all the sides, which created turmoil, kind of a ripple effect of turmoil in the other generations of my family. So there was a lot of chaos at that point in my life, and I like peace. So I was trying to find it. I was desperately searching for it. And that's also the part where I realized I was also responsible for creating that. And so I had to take a lot of my power back
Mm.
in my own life. And it's a constant thing. So I am always having to be intentional about it.
It's amazing what you're saying right now because that does take a lot of strength and determination and courage to really know that you are the one you are the only one that can change. And that perspective, here we go again, perspective change changes everything. But it can be so scary, especially when everything that you thought worked in the past to create this peace within yourself wasn't working.
Hmm.
And then you had to go to this place of full responsibility for it. And that must have felt a little scary, right?
It's no fun at all because we have so many things now to distract us, and I'm by no means perfect at it. I did go through a period in that time where just to try to maintain any kind of control, I went deep into my work. I have the kind of work where if I don't want to necessarily have a voice, I can let my work speak for me. And that can be a slippery slope because, again, if you allow that to go on for too long, then you lose yourself. And
Yes.
so I started trying to focus my creativity on projects that would bring my voice out into the forefront instead of just letting the work speak for itself and people make their conclusions based on that.
Yeah. Okay. So beautifully put. What have you learned about yourself and who you are that you didn't know before?
Uh, it really comes down to the comfort level I have with letting people know how quirky I like to be. And so I love to look at three sides of the coin. You know, a lot of people see two sides. I can quite often see three, and it's very frustrating for people because, like, what about this way or that way? And like, I hadn't thought about that, and now you've complicated things. And so getting comfortable with that has been a journey. And not that I'm trying to be annoying or just, it's really about giving people more perspective. And I found a lot of people don't like having their perspective expanded in any way at all. But in terms of what I've found out about me, I found out that I love little what I call micro adventures. And maybe that is I'll give you an example. I've gotten really deep down the rabbit hole of just skin moisturizing and body butters. I don't know why. I've never been interested before, but I've been going crazy with mango butter, mixing with castor oil, mixing with. I just got some rosemary essential oils in this morning, and gonna make up a new.
You have to share this with us later
And
on, somewhere on your website. Yeah.
right, and so I've been doing that for like 3 weeks, watching tons of YouTube videos, and in 2 weeks I'll feel like, okay, I did that, and that I got everything I needed to out of that experience. I'll be on to something else. And I've never been that way. I've never been, you know, DIY, really intense and then go on to something else. But I found in the last maybe 4 or 5 months, I've really enjoyed that. And so maybe I'll get really into cooking a specific kind of dish for a little while until I feel like I've perfected it. And then, okay, boom, I'm on to maybe something else entirely. And so it's these little well, I call them micro adventures or experiments that I think are so important. They help my creativity
Yes.
and they give me something to look forward to. And that's totally outside of my work, totally outside of writing or any of the other things that I think are fun. And it's an activity I can share with my kids. I've got a daughter, she's 15. So sometimes I'll pull her in and say, hey, this is something I'm doing. It takes us maybe 15, 20 minutes for me to show her. And then we can move on to other things.
I love how you're just expanding your experience, and your creativity, because you don't know what, if we just stay in our little box, like you said, a lot of people only want to see one viewpoint and that's it. And
Right.
they want to expand to see, well, maybe I could enjoy this. And I never even thought I would enjoy this, but why
Absolutely.
not try it? And then you might stumble upon something that you really fall in love with, or you'll come back to, or you're teaching your daughter something new to do the same thing. There's so many wonderful things out there in the world to try
So
and to
many.
create, but we kind of limit ourselves. And how many people sit at home thinking they're bored or they don't have anything to do, or they're lonely, and you're like, no, you're opening up. Like, there's so many things that you can explore. So I congratulate you on your journey and sharing it with us and your podcast. So, and help us, the people that are listening right now, if they want to expand, and their perspective and their
Right.
journey, and where they know that their happiness, they think their happiness is outside of themselves.
Right.
Maybe
Yes.
maybe two steps that you would tell them to do to really know that they are responsible for their happiness.
Oh, okay. The first one, well, if they want to check out some of the guests and some of the podcast episodes that I do are just me and my perspective.
Wow.
And so those are things maybe I've learned, like I've got a whole podcast on how I had a breakthrough through journaling. And so I started a journaling practice back in COVID, and it was something I just committed to do. Well, 2 years passed before I realized I started looking back through the years and realized, oh gosh, I'm living the same year over and over. And you can't do that until you've got a couple of years of just writing in a journal. And so that was a breakthrough. So I've got a whole episode on that. But if they want to check out ajoyfulrebellion.com, you can check it out there. It's just the podcast, or you can get that on anywhere you listen to podcasts. And I interview guests every week who either have gone through their own joyful rebellion or help people do it. And so there are a lot of different topics there, everything from finances to I'm going to Savannah, Georgia next week to interview a ghostwriter in a cemetery.
Wow.
And
No, no.
I know we're just going
Without ghosts?
extra.
No, no, he's a ghost writer for people. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
she's a ghostwriter. So yeah, if you and that's the whole thing. So many people I talk to, they want to write a book, they want to get their story out there, they don't know how to, and they don't feel confident. And so that's why I'm talking to a ghostwriter. Like, this stuff is accessible if you just maybe look at it a little bit differently than we were told to.
Wow.
And then, so that's the first thing. Maybe check out the podcast. But the second thing I found to really help with this, taking ownership of our own destiny, writing our own story, so to speak, is I started looking into the philosophy of Stoicism about 3 years ago.
Hmm.
And Stoicism, it's a little over 2,000 years old. It's not a religion, it's a philosophy. It was started in Greece by a guy named Zeno. And it is, in essence, a lot of people hear Stoic and they think it's suppressing your emotions. Well, it's really about realizing that the only thing you can control is how you respond to something. And so you can't control your emotions, but Stoicism is about the domestication, I guess, is how it was famously put by someone. And it is about realizing that things are going to happen in the world, and the only power you have is your reaction to them. And there's a lot of power in that. And once you realize that everything you need is inside of you, not outside of you, sometimes you have to go seek advice. Sometimes you need to get perspective, and quite often you need to experiment because you know what you need to do. You just don't know quite how to get there. But I have found a lot of guidance in that philosophy of Stoicism because it keeps bringing you right back to, this is something that you can handle. It's kind of like that meme you say, you can see, you can cry in the rain or dance in the rain. It's going to rain
Yes.
either way. It's your choice.
Yes.
You respond to it.
I don't, I've never not heard of that, but that's a philosophy I absolutely believe in. So I want to look that up. And because I do also I join you in this belief 100%. And if someone's out there listening to this podcast right now and you're thinking, what? Um, it's true though. That's really the only thing we can control outside. We can't control the weather,
Right.
politics. There's a lot of things that we can't control, but we can control how we respond. And we can
Hmm.
control our thoughts and our beliefs. And so I am 100% with you on this, that if you just start thinking that way, it can change your life.
Hmm. Very
It,
much. And just as a bonus tip, there is an author, his name's Ryan Holiday, and he writes a lot uh, on this stoicism and the philosophy. And he's a modern day writer. He lives in Austin, Texas. He's on a lot of podcasts, but he is probably the person talking the loudest about this whole philosophy and also translating a lot of these 2,000-year-old, when I read Greek, it doesn't go well. And so he's doing the heavy lifting for us and translating a lot of what these things are talking about, and they're completely applicable to our lives today.
and what's the book? Does he have a book, you said
He's
also?
got, oh, he's got so many books. His most famous, I think, is called The Obstacle is the Way.
Obstacles of
And he's got one called The Daily Stoic. And it's really kind of daily. You go by the date, and it's got a one-page, very digestible uh, thought or something you can carry on throughout the day. But he's got, gosh, probably a dozen books on the subject of Stoicism, and they're all really accessible, easy to read and understand.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to look up his work right now when
All
we're done.
right.
Yeah, I love this. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for just showing up on my podcast and being so honest.
Uh,
You're,
yeah.
you're just very real, you're very honest, and you're sharing this journey and your podcast to help others share their story. And you're holding this light for everyone. And it's so important that we can make a change in our life and we can have a joyous rebellion. we can
Yeah.
be we can be happy, and there's a path that starts within. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. It's really been enlightening, and I have a new perspective.
Well, excellent. Well, I'm so glad we were able to get together today and have this conversation. And thank you for doing what you do for your audience, because you definitely have, I've heard several of the podcasts, and just from the guests that you bring on, certainly do offer that roadmap in a way, and also the ability for people to connect with their courage and to find that within them. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, you're so welcome, and thank you for that. It means a lot. And we will continue to be in touch, and we'll do this again. And I want everyone to we'll make sure and post how to get a hold of James and his podcast, and any other messages for our audience of how to get a hold of you.
Oh, just the podcast is the best way to interact, and would love to, if anyone listens to it and has any guest ideas, that is gold for me, because I love talking to new people each and every week.
Great. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that have people that would be great on your podcast. All
Uh,
right, go out there and have fun with the ghostwriter.
all right. Thanks so much.
All right, take care. Thank you again for being my guest today.
Thank you.
All right, take care.